Welcome, guys, geeks, and certified freaks, to episode 83 of Project Geekology. My name is Dakota, and I am joined, as always, with...
Anthony.
Okay, Sunspot is a character that has been featured...
Nothing to do with the movie that we're covering.
Nothing to do with the movie that we're covering. But in the same vein, Anthony, you did get to see some of X-Men 97, correct?
I did, yes.
And Roberto da Costa is Sunspot. He's a character that was introduced in 1983, and this is our 83rd episode. But the film that we are covering today, because, you know, we're mutant and proud, is X-Men First Class, the 2011 film that kind of reinvented the X-Men franchise. I think it reinvented itself pretty good, actually. And we're going to talk about all that worked and all that didn't with that movie and how it kind of pivots the X-Men franchise into the 2010s.
Right. Like, up until that point, we'd still been dabbling with kind of the same cast. Not really cast, but, like, you know, the last film we covered was X-Men Origins Wolverine, which was Hugh Jackman, and so that was kind of like the last film of that generation of, I guess, X-Men films.
For sure.
So
yeah, there's
this
definitely...
one ushers in, this is a new era, you know?
It's an interesting one. Yeah, there's a lot that we have to talk about when it comes to timeline wibbly wobbliness, what this film was intended to be, when this film actually came out in relation to other movies, namely the MCU, and our general, appreciation for it when we first saw it and now. How has that changed? So I'm excited to dive into that. But Anthony, before we get into anything, what have you been up to, my friend?
Absolutely nada, man. Like, I've just been in a catatonic state. Like, I've just been kind of in stasis.
Just dreaming of Persona.
Just dreaming of Persona. Hey, look, see, I'm not the one that brought it up this week. It was your turn.
I had to pop the
to
bubble.
Bring up.
Yeah, I had to burst that little... Get it out of the way while we still can.
There you go. Well, actually, believe it or not, I finally hopped on a project that I've been talking about for a while now. It's going to take a little while to come to fruition, but I'm working on it, and honestly, to tell you the truth, it's gonna do a lot more for me than anything when I complete this project, and it'll do a little bit for you too, actually, Dakota.
Nice. I love projects that do a little thing for me. Tell me about it. I actually have no idea what he's talking about in this moment, so
yeah,
anything could come out of his mouth. It could be like a Persona fan meet and greet. I don't even know. Let's find out.
Close enough, It is actually a Persona website. Just kidding. I'm actually working on a proper website for the podcast. I've got some code down. I've got some HTML, some CSS. The bare bones are kind of there. I mean, I'm working on one page right now, so there's other pages I want to work on, but I'm working on it. I have an idea. I'm running with it. But yeah, the reason why I say that this is going to do a lot for me is because it's honestly practice using some of the knowledge that I've learned. And I mean, dude, I've been talking about this for the longest time. I've said it on the podcast. I've said it to you off of the podcast. And so I'm like, dude, I need to finally do it. I'm not using my newly learned skills to actually get better with them. So I'm like, dude, I've been talking about this. This is a passion project for me. So yeah, man, I'm working on it.
That's really exciting, bro. I'm really happy to hear that. And also, it's a cool project. You're going to get some actual real life experience making something that you already are excited to make. And I think that that's how most people start in any kind of creative endeavor that turns into a job, like film editors, directors, they do, not fan stuff. They do like their own small stuff before jumping in and using that knowledge towards something bigger, whether it be like editing a film, or for me, just if I ever wanted to become like a video editor on YouTube, I've been doing it for years. I've edited hundreds and hundreds of videos. So I have that knowledge if I wanted to go that route. But
that's true, man.
Yeah, so it's something that is a passion of yours, I know, is web design and web development. And you also, I know you deeply love the podcast that we run together. So this will be a really awesome opportunity for you to kind of stretch those legs a little bit. So how do you plan for it to look or feel? Are you going to use like the RSS feed from Buzzsprout, which Buzzsprout is the podcast application that we kind of drop our episodes into, and then they spread it abroad. So do you have any idea as to like how to merge that into our site?
So yeah, so there's ways that you can, and I'm doing research now, but there's ways that you can actually embed it to the website that it uses actual HTML code and it sets it up for you. It sets them up in these invisible containers called divs, and you can style them in different ways. So I've actually, believe it or not, like I've messed around with that. Like I said, there's a bare bones website that I already have.
Okay, cool.
You know, I've already got like a nav bar. I've already got like a whole first page. Now I'm filling in a lot of the blanks. I'm trying to figure out where I want to put things. You know, it's honestly, to tell you the truth, the first iteration of this website, you know, is probably, it's not going to look like Facebook. I mean, not probably. It will not look anything like Facebook or anything super professional because I am new at this. But it still will be something that I can say like, dude, like I did this. And it's something that it's not, you know, it's a job not done. There's always ways to improve things.
Yeah, and that's a good point. And I like that attitude, you know, like once you complete something, that doesn't actually necessarily mean you are finished with it, especially if it's a project you love, you know. New stuff comes out, new technology, new types of editing, web pages, for example. You just refine your craft and you get better, and that's all part of the fun of it.
Right. And once I kind of tap into something called version control, I'll really be able to update the website a little bit easier than like, you know, I don't have to be like, that I have to upload a whole new version of the website. You know, there's ways that you can set it up. That's what a lot of websites do. And honestly, to tell you the truth, I'll be doing projects after this also, but maintaining the website will also help me with practice. Because when I do build websites for people, I have to get used to actually maintaining it for them. And
that's a good point. I hadn't actually even thought about that. Okay, yeah. All right. I'm excited, man.
Anything breaks, I got to go inside and see what's up. But yeah, man, that's really like the biggest thing that I've been working towards. And, you know, this weekend I had to deal with this whole AC situation. Yeah. Where my AC went down. And
have you gotten that resolved yet, or?
Oh yeah, dude, I would not be recording right now in my room if it wasn't. I probably would like record like in that, remember like I some of the episodes that I told you I had recorded with my friends, we recorded in this like library study space. I probably would have taken that over there.
Okay, that makes sense. So well, I'm happy you are not braving the Miami Heat, not the basketball team, the actual heat of Miami alone without a working AC. I'm happy you're not braving that, and I'm happy that you got that all sorted. But while you were away, you stayed at your friend's place for a couple days. You got the opportunity to watch at least a couple episodes, or maybe a single episode of X-Men 97. What are your thoughts?
It's really cool. I haven't gotten super deep into it yet. I actually, after watching a couple episodes, it made me want to go back and to watch the older one. So I'm going through the old cartoon right now. But from what I've seen in the newer one, the animation is super crisp. It looks really good. I will say that, I mean, and I don't know if you get used to it or if this voice actor kind of comes into his own, but the Wolverine voice actor was a little off-putting for me. There, you know, it's not like you can tell that the effort is there, you know, and that's what's important to me.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. A lot of the actors did reprise their roles from the original show, so I don't know if that is the original voice actor. I can look it up right now.
I mean, if it is,
that actually is. That is the original voice actor for Wolverine. He is 68 years old at this point, so he probably just sounds old. But
yeah, probably.
I do think I would say episode 3 is kind of where he comes into his own. That's how I felt.
Okay.
But yeah, most of the voice actors that they use for the show are the original cast. think a couple of exceptions. But how far did you get, if you don't mind my asking?
The first 2 episodes.
Okay, so then there you go. I do think that the show really picks up by the 3rd episode, and by the 5th episode, your jaw will be on the floor. Like, it is heavy television, like Red Wedding television, you know, like it's.
Oh my gosh, Red Wedding.
I don't want to say that like people die or anything like that, because I'm not trying to suggest that, but it's that level. Like it's
right. Shock value
is there. Yeah, you're gonna blow.
I was gonna say, dang, does like half the team get killed or something? Like, whoa.
No spoilers here. I don't want to say anything, but it's definitely shock value.
Okay. Yeah, man. I've been watching through it. It's been like a trip down memory lane watching this, because I remember seeing a bunch of this like when I was younger. I remember seeing a lot of the like Spider-Man when I was a kid.
The animated series, yeah.
Yeah.
What's interesting is, and I don't think this is a real big spoiler, some of the shows from our youth, whether it be, you know, like the X-Men animated series, the Spider-Man animated series in the 90s, those 2 shows specifically were always connected in the same universe. According to like Marvel Encyclopedia, those 2 shows were connected. It seems with X-Men 97, they're also connecting other shows like Fantastic Four and other shows, which is it's just a strange kind of mix, an amalgam of different stuff that is all currently in the same universe, like that same animated side of the universe. They're all kind of connecting those shows, it seems, from my experience with what we saw this season of that show. But anyway, I don't want to go off on too much of a tangent on that show, because I feel like we've talked about X-Men 97 quite a bit. Eventually I would like to cover it. But anything else you've been up to?
No, man, pretty much that. Well, and I've kind of actually gone back to watch. So there's this anime that I had started to, or I had watched it when I kind of came back to my anime reawakening in the early 2010s. So like as a kid, you know, I started off watching anime with DBZ and like Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh, and then kind of expanded off of that with Adult Swim and Toonami. But I did have like a dark age, you know, that like I would probably peep some anime here and there, but I didn't watch too much anime. I think that a lot of us, or some of us, go through a period of time that we grew up with anime and we either don't watch it for a little while or we just stop watching it altogether.
Yeah, I had a similar experience where I didn't watch anything for a long time, and then around the early 2010s, that's when Attack on Titan and Sword Art Online and other stuff like that started popping up, and I was just like, let me get a Crunchyroll account. And for a couple of years I was really big on that, so that I was definitely that there. And I kind of feel like I'm back in a dark age now when it comes to anime, like just anime itself, even though I'm watching a little bit of One Piece here and there. But overall, I'm not super into it like I used to be. I'm sorry. I kind of broke off of your story, so keep going.
No. I mean, it's relevant. Well, so that's kind of what my dark age was, like a little bit here and there. But when I came to my anime reawakening, I had asked my friend for a couple things to like watch, and one of them was this anime that some people may know, some people may not know. It's not widely loved or hated. If you like it, you like it. If you don't, you don't. It's called Air Gear. I don't know if you've ever heard of it.
I don't think I have.
It's this anime that pretty much, it's like inline skating, but it's motorized inline skates, and they like have these really cool like races and battles, you know. It's got, you know, the whole shonen aspect to it. But so I kind of like went back to it and I watched it, and kind of like an appreciation, you know, to like, I was like, man, you know, I remember this anime. This is one of the ones that kind of got me back into it. And one of the things that I'll never forget, man, or I'll never like forgive them, is that they never finished it. Like, they just had one season and that's it. If you want to finish the story, you have to read the manga. So
apparently that isn't as
uncommon
as you might think. Yeah.
Right.
Especially in the early 2010s, there was a lot, at least when, you know, like the couple seasons of like anime that I was, you know, really invested in, there were quite a few that I thought were really interesting anime worth watching, you know, week in, week out, that only lasted a season because it didn't get the viewership or whatever. Another one that I remember, I think, was...
That was the issue with Air Gear.
I forget the name of the one that I'm thinking of. But anyway, yeah, there's a lot of anime that only lasts one season, and you just never hear about it in the States unless you're like in touch with what's coming out regularly, you know?
Right, right. Well, I missed Air Gear. It actually came out in 2007. So that was kind of like during my dark ages. So I never had caught it. But yeah, that was definitely during that time where it was a bit harder to catch, anime. And you picked up Crunchyroll, and I went like a few weeks ago, I went on this website called The Wayback Machine. Have you ever heard of it?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a website that
it's an archive.
Yeah, if someone archives something into the Wayback Machine, it will remember a web page and all its media as per the date that it was archived, basically. That's the general premise.
So I did that with Crunchyroll.
Oh.
And I did not realize that Crunchyroll originally was one of those websites that you went to watch anime not so legally.
Yeah, Crunchyroll is an interesting thing.
It really is.
Pirating anime is a serious offense in Japan. It's not uncommon to hear of people going to prison for years and years, sometimes for life, because they pirated anime in Japan. It's a big offense, and somehow the American market that is Crunchyroll had one of these pirating websites, like watchmovie.tv, something along those lines. It was one of those, where it's just bootlegged copies of, in this case, it was anime. So it did have a huge library of it, and it was one of the bigger ones. It was probably the biggest one. But at some point during I want to say 2010 or 2011, they legitimized, and they started reaching out to all these companies, basically saying, like, we want to form a streaming service with your anime. And that's when they kind of broke the mold. And then Funimation wanted to make their own anime streaming service. And I think nowadays it's just Crunchyroll is the main one at this point.
Right. Crunchyroll ate Funimation.
Yes. I think there was a time period where it was kind of like Netflix and Disney Plus, or Netflix and Hulu, where it was competing content on several platforms with Funimation and all of its products, as well as Crunchyroll and all of its licenses. Because Funimation owned the rights to a number of different English translated, dubbed over anime, like Dragon Ball Z and stuff. So at a certain point, I think Funimation saw the writing on the wall. More people were getting involved with anime, and they were going to Crunchyroll. So they just kind of signed up with Crunchyroll. They merged, and I think it's just one big library now. I don't know how it's currently run now, because I haven't been on Crunchyroll in quite a bit, but maybe you can illuminate the masses.
Actually, you know what? Let me tell you something. That was such a fascinating tidbit of information. I actually want to table this conversation, and I think that we should have a full-on episode on Crunchyroll.
Okay, all right.
Because I actually want to. I went in the Wayback Machine. I looked a little bit back. I was like, oh my gosh. I even caught glimpses of anime that I was like, oh my gosh, I forgot that existed. That was really cool. Yeah, dude, I would love to have a discussion or an episode just covering Crunchyroll. And that would actually be, I've already done an episode with a friend on a website. So we should do one on Crunchyroll.
Yeah, we can do it. And it doesn't have to be a mainline one either. If I don't know how much information we can actually discuss about it, but we've covered maybe 10 minutes already, so I don't see why we couldn't also
right we could add to it. Honestly, to tell the truth, we could do one of those research sessions that I suggested.
Yeah, we could definitely do that
for this.
Yeah, we could do that. All right.
But yeah, we've been doing a lot of talking, and it's been mostly centered on me. I know that you had some stuff that you wanted to talk about. This is probably going to be a little bit of a longer episode, but you know what, I feel like we have a lot to talk about.
It seems like I have a lot to talk about. First and foremost, I just want to get this out of the way because I'm really enjoying it. I'm currently on volume 16 of One Piece. And my shelf is getting full, but it's a happy fullness. It looks really nice just seeing all the volumes side by side. And I have finally met the next member of the Straw Hat team, although he doesn't yet know that he's part of that team. Tony Chopper. He is the reindeer character who ate the human fruit or the human fruit. I forget what it's called. But anyway, the human devil fruit.
It's one of the devil fruit, yeah.
Which turns this reindeer into a human-esque reindeer. You know, it still has the antlers, still has the, you know, reindeer features, but it walks and talks like a human. And it just kind of, I've started getting into the backstory of Chopper as a character within Volume 16. And
his backstory is sad to me.
So far it has been sad. Yeah, I don't know how sad it's gonna get, but yeah, so I'm currently like I'm still in the Baroque Works arc, but I'm currently on on Drum Island in the Grand Line. So that's the one where it's like always snowing. But anyway, I'm having fun with it. Most of you guys have no idea what the heck I'm talking about, so I'm gonna move on. But One Piece is really good. It kind of got a little weird when they first entered the Grand Line, and I didn't really like the story, but whenever they get to an island and they start kind of, you know, spending a little time there and learning the story of the people on the island or the events that kind of got our heroes there, that's what really interests me. And yeah, I'm really enjoying this right now. Let's see. I also wanted to talk about, you know, you were mentioning that you had been partaking in some creative endeavors with, you know, web design and hopefully making a workable website for you guys to enjoy in regards to our podcast. First and foremost, this has been the best month on the podcast for downloads in our history. And
Right. We definitely hit a milestone.
We definitely hit a milestone, and we want to thank you guys for showing us a little bit of love. You know, it's not a lot of people listening. Just as podcasts go, as content goes, we're very small. But we appreciate every single one of these listens that we get from you guys. And every download that you do on whatever service, whether you listen to it or not, it counts as a listen for us. And that's how Buzzsprout, the podcast site that we put our episodes into, kind of counts our stats, I guess. So thank you guys for giving us those listens and giving us those downloads. And be sure to, you know, if you enjoy the content that we produce here, be sure to comment, be sure to share it around social media, and definitely rate our stuff high so that whatever podcast service, say, you know, Apple Music or Deezer or Spotify, Audible, whatever podcast application that you use, rate it high, our show specifically, so that other people can also, you know, see that this is, something worth listening to. And that'll hopefully, you know, get this ball rolling. And, you know, not that we were ever going to necessarily stop making the show if we didn't get like more listens or more downloads. We've been going at it a couple years now. We do this for fun. So it's really cool to see that our continued fun that we have together on the show is proving worthwhile to you guys. But what I actually wanted to talk to you guys about was I am continuing my work on a visual Star Wars timeline that I hope to unveil in a video very soon. And Anthony, I sent you a high quality image of that. It's a massive image. It's like 25,000 pixels by 10,000 pixels. There's just so much Star Wars content out there, from films, shows, audio dramas, adult novels, young adult novels, junior novels, comic books, lots and lots of comic books, dude. There's manga, there's video games, and I'm trying to capture all of that. I'm probably going to stay away from the short stories and the short comics just because that would get way too out of hand and it would get so messy and it wouldn't be visually appealing and useful at that point. But so what I'm working on, if you can visualize it, is like there's like 5 lines that kind of weave down the page, and it kind of looks like a big lightsaber whip. I'm calling it the time saber. And
hey, look, but it looks like we're getting a lightsaber whip.
We are getting a lightsaber whip in The Acolyte, you know, thanks to the character Vernestra Rowe, a really cool character in the High Republic that is making her way into The Acolyte over 100 years after her introduction. So that's really cool. And that kind of gave me the idea. Maybe I can do a multi-tiered lightsaber timeline whip sort of thing to kind of give myself more room instead of a singular line. So that's what I'm doing. And, you know, my ultimate goal with this, if I can do it, is to make this a principal thing. I don't want to charge you guys an arm and a leg for, something that I've produced on Photoshop, but if I can make a poster for you guys with the entire Star Wars timeline and keep this updated for you if you decide to buy a new version later on down the line, I don't know. I don't even know if that's a legal thing for me to do. I don't know if I can sell that. But that's kind of a stretch goal for me, and I'm really excited because it's, from my point of view, I'm looking at it right now. It looks really cool. I think it's going to be a really useful tool for people down the line when it comes to Star Wars, because there's so much Star Wars content out there, and
it definitely looks cool, and I could imagine that being like on the wall,
right?
Seeing like I can definitely imagine that.
So that's what I've been working on. I don't want to take too much time, but now we should definitely segue our discussion into the film and topic at hand. Star Wars Fallen Order First Jedi. No, sorry. I had a I had a stroke just there. No.
Oh my god, that was crazy.
X-Men First Class, the 2011 film. Anthony.
But not the first film.
Not the first film, but it is the earliest. No, is it even the earliest? I guess technically it is like the earliest when it comes to like the climax of the film and in relation to the other films in the series. But Anthony, tell me why you hate this movie so much.
Actually, I don't. It's
I'm kidding.
This film is, I think it's pretty good. Like, we get new faces for Magneto and Professor X. We also get a new face for Beast and Mystique. And then we get some new mutants in this one also, which there's definitely some really, really cool mutants. One that's very similar to Nightcrawler.
Mm-hmm. Azazel, definitely.
Yes.
I think, if I remember correctly, canonically in this universe, Azazel and Mystique are Nightcrawler's parents. Because you get the blue skin and you get the teleporting abilities. And the actual look of the teleportation, how it kind of like poofs in the air like his does, that specific effect, that design is very similar to the tendrils of mist that poof when Nightcrawler goes off. But
yes.
Yeah, this is a really interesting movie for a number of reasons. But for me, I think what really interests me is that this was clearly intended to be a working prequel to the original X-Men trilogy. And I think down the line, they kind of just gave up on that. In future movies, there's less and less of a, aside from Days of Future Past, where they actually do cross over, the old cast and the new cast. I think with this movie, they were definitely still under the assumption that this is the same timeline of events that, led to the X-Men trilogy. But there's certain mistakes that really, I don't think can be reconciled and make it work, basically. But I still really love this movie for what, they were trying to accomplish. I love Magneto's crusade in the beginning of trying to take down Nazis and eventually reach Sebastian Shaw. But I also think it's interesting to talk about like the time period that this movie came out. So this was 2011. This is the same year that Marvel released Thor and Captain America, the First Avenger. So at this point, we had heard rumblings of a Avengers team-up movie, and we had probably even seen some leaked like set photos of the Avengers team together, but we didn't know what kind of a juggernaut, what kind of a beast the Marvel Studios universe would eventually become. And in no uncertain terms, it changed the movie industry completely when after Avengers came out. But at this point, X-Men, if I remember correctly, and I'm trying to remember my own sentiments at the time, I think X-Men was still the more popular series at this point. You had Iron Man and Iron Man 2. Both of them did phenomenally. The Incredible Hulk was kind of lackluster in terms of the box office accumulation. And I think Thor and the First Avenger, like Captain America First Avenger, didn't perform as well as some of the X-Men movies had done at this point. So I think the general opinion up until this point was that, oh man, X-Men is killing it.
Yeah, and you said 2011. Mind you, we're really, honestly, the MCU has not been, it's still pretty much in its like child stage, you know?
At this point,
it's
it was still in phase one.
Even though we get Avengers the following year, I remember seeing the Iron Man film, and that film really took a lower tier Marvel character and like made him popular. Let's be real. Before that movie, people really didn't care about Iron Man.
What's interesting
like,
is
Iron who?
Yeah,
and
a lot of people don't realize that Iron Man wasn't an A tier character. You know, he was barely B tier. He was maybe C tier. And that's being generous, because up until the first Iron Man movie, there had been no really great Iron Man content ever. He was best as an ensemble character alongside the Avengers. He had a single run of comics that you could buy as a trade paperback, but it was about him battling addiction. So like any writers coming at Iron Man up until that point, that's really all that they had at their disposal to look at. This random comic of him battling addiction. So, and you know, he had been in cartoons and stuff. He was a popular Avengers character. But Avengers also weren't the team that they are today either. When you thought of superhero teams, Avengers, they weren't on the same par as Justice League. It's crazy what a decade. It's crazy what a decade can do.
Dude, I wouldn't even at least at that point, I wouldn't have even considered them on the same level as X-Men.
Oh,
like,
no,
dude,
no.
I was much more of a fan. Dude, I had been an X-Men for an X-Men. Dude, what the heck am I saying? I've been a fan of X-Men.
We're having strokes on this podcast.
Dude, seriously. I've been a fan for X-Men far longer than the Avengers.
Oh, yeah. And if you were to ask me what my favorite Marvel superhero teams are, I would have said X-Men and Fantastic Four before I would have ever said Avengers. So that just kind of shows like how B and C tier these teams and characters were. That's what Marvel was like bringing up at this time period. I don't want to spend too much time on Marvel Studios, but that's the mindset that I want to like go into with this discussion, is that at this point, the general populace knew a lot more about X-Men. And this film really opened the gates to how they can tell that narrative. And actually, I think that X-Men Origins Wolverine did a lot of good when it comes to this reboot, because they rebooted the character of Sabretooth and they dived into the history of one of their characters, that being Wolverine. So if they could do that with Wolverine, and it didn't really work box office wise, you know, it wasn't a huge critical success, but what if instead of doing that for singular characters, they do that for the whole team? You know, what happened? What did Xavier's First Class look like? And I think that's kind of where this idea germinated from, and I'm happy it did, because it's a good film.
It is. If you're gonna reboot, you definitely want to start off strong, and they do with this film. So I guess, you know, X-Men First Class, do you want to just kind of give like a little bit of a brief synopsis of what this film is about?
Sure. So with these prequel X-Men movies, they did something that's kind of cool, I think. They went kind of decade by decade within the X-Men universe and gave us characters that would have fit semi-naturally within each decade. So with First Class, we're talking about early 60s. You know, this ends with the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962. So this film takes place in the 60s. The next film, the past part of Days of Future Past, takes place in the 70s. Then you have the Age of Apocalypse, which is 80s, and then the 90s film. So they kind of jump decade by decade, which is a cool idea, but a lot of the characters don't really age appropriately for that, so that's something. But anyway, when it comes to like what the actual story is, you have Magneto, who, by the way, I thought it was interesting that they reused the footage from the first movie of the Holocaust scene. I forgot that they reused that very same footage, and then they just added a shot of Sebastian Shaw looking down at a young Magneto moving the gates. And basically, like, he tortures Magneto into utilizing his powers again, you know, show me that trick one more time, basically. And to do so, he kills Magneto's mother right in front of him. this obviously awakens his powers like nothing else. And he goes on a rampage later in his life, jumping forward from the 1940s to the 1960s, where he's an adult now. He's going to Argentina. He's looking for the Nazis that ran. And he's causing havoc within those circles, looking for Sebastian Shaw to eventually, enact his revenge there. And to kind of bridge what Professor X is doing at this time, he's giving lectures on mutation and what the next potential step in mutant evolution is at different colleges, and catches the attention of Moira McTaggart, who believes that she has seen mutants in real life plotting against the US government. She's a CIA agent, and she enlists his help as well as Mystique, whom earlier in the film we learn has been basically a sister to Charles Xavier for her whole life, which I'm not a huge fan of. I'll be honest. I think that's the dumbest part in the movie, but it worked for the narrative, so I don't have too much of an issue with it. And yeah, so after Moira McTaggart enlists the help of Charles Xavier, the CIA helps him find more mutants with the help of McCoy, who is Beast in secret. They kind of build a pseudo Cerebro to allow him to find other like-minded mutants, and they kind of do, and it kind of all boils down into a certain mutants, are pro helping humanity, like get along with them, and then, you have the Magnetos of the world who don't ever foresee humans getting along with mutants the way that he would prefer. So it's a really interesting balance, and it ends, like I said, with the Cuban Missile Crisis, but, changed, altered for historical purposes. In real life, there was that standoff between Soviet ships and American ships, never really went anywhere. But what if mutants were involved? And then what if both armies decided that they wanted to take out mutants? And that's kind of what made Magneto snap, So that's kind of the gist of what happens in like a macro look at the film. But did I miss anything in particular that you wanted to touch on?
So you had mentioned Moira a few times. She was in The Last Stand. Yes,
that's a good point. You're right. X-Men The Last Stand, the third in the trilogy. Moira McTaggart does make a small cameo. And like you mentioned, she's also in the post-credit scene or mid-credit scene, wherein she is studying the ability to move one person's consciousness into a non-animate body, basically.
Yes.
And it's kind of hinted heavily that Charles Xavier, after death in the third film, comes back to life as, in a new body in this film. But this is a Moira McTaggart that's, many, many years prior to this. So Moira McTaggart in the 2000s film would have to be in her 60s or 70s.
Right, yeah, she's older in that one. So what do you think about the casting of James McAvoy as Professor X and Michael Fassbender as Magneto?
It's tough. I don't want to say anything super negative about their casting because, let's be honest, both of them did a fantastic job. But if you're trying to tell me that these characters become Patrick Stewart and Ian McKellen, I don't buy it, But I will say that there are glimpses of the prior actors' performances in their performances. It's definitely inspired by their performances. And I like that about it. I wasn't a huge fan of well, I don't want to say I wasn't a huge fan. I liked...
You didn't like to see Professor X, at a bar, dropping mutant lines.
I was trying to think about, how do I talk about this exactly? It was weird. Let's be honest. I don't want to think of Professor X that way. But he had a life at some point. So.
Oh my goodness.
More than anything, I didn't like his relationship with Mystique. I think it doesn't make any sense. The fact that 3 films go by with Mystique in the original trilogy, those two characters never really interact.
Right.
And
there's also a couple of things that were very un-Professor X-like.
Like what?
He obviously preferred Mystique when she was in her human form.
Right.
Other than, and then... what do you call it? I always thought that Professor X was more about accepting who you were, and Magneto. So Magneto and Professor X always had like that similar thing, like accepting who you were, like don't hide.
So
Obviously
I agree with you there. I think it was kind of strange that like he preferred her in a human form, but I also have to think at the time, early 60s, she was essentially naked, There was very little left to the imagination with her in her blue form.
Right. So that I get. Even though the 60s, like...
Yeah.
That, we all know what was going on in the 60s.
But that's the late 60s.
Yeah. No, but still, I mean, yeah, no, I totally get. But, like, other than that, it was still a little weird that even that he could have been like, instead of like, oh, why are you looking like that? You could have been like, hey, just throw some clothes on.
I will say that McAvoy's performance when he's doing his Professor X thing, I know you sent me a GIF of like McAvoy putting his fingers to his temple, whenever he
They always love to do that.
Telepathy. Although, did Emma Frost do it? I don't remember if she did it or not. I don't think she was doing that. She kind of just like tilted her head a little bit. She had her own way of...
They like to do that. So they'll do like the finger to the forehead or to like the temple. They'll do the hand out.
Yes, yeah.
They'll do the head tilt. It's never just like... I mean, obviously they want to show that something's happening, but I would always imagine that if something like that were to happen, like you would just be like, or like if you're trying to like lift something up, you'd be like, like now, like one hand, like you'd be trying to like, I don't know, like...
Yeah. I also think it's more visually interesting.
Yeah.
In, like, actual cinema and just looking at it. Because you can kind of visualize what they're trying to do, even though it's all movie magic, But what I was going to say was I appreciated McAvoy's attempt at capturing a Professor X or Patrick Stewart-like performance more than I appreciated Fassbender, who did a fantastic job. I don't think that Fassbender did a very good job of trying to emulate Ian McKellen.
Right. I could feel, or I could see him being closer to maybe like the animated Magneto.
Okay, I could see that. Yeah.
But yeah, no, we know who they're really trying to go for. I mean, you're right. This is trying to be a bit of a prequel to that first X-Men, and so
at this point
should
it
be
was
emulating a lot more.
Yeah, at this point it was like a solid prequel to the X-Men films.
Right.
Yeah, it's interesting. They retconned a couple things, like how Magneto got his helmet. Also, I think in the original trilogy, they mentioned that Magneto helped build Cerebro. We know that didn't happen at this point. We also know, I think there was a comment where it said that, I think if I remember correctly, in the original trilogy, there's a line where Professor X said, I still had my hair, or I lost my hair before being in a wheelchair, which didn't turn out to be true. I can't remember if there's any. I'm sure there's plenty of others. But yeah, I think the biggest change for this continuity has to be Raven or Mystique being so closely tied to Professor X. What I will say, I like the performance of both characters. At no point am I questioning these are Professor X or Magneto. But when I try to think about who they are in relation to the original trilogy, which at this point is a hard prequel, it's hard for me to imagine a little bit.
So we also get Jennifer Lawrence as Mystique.
What are your thoughts? What are your thoughts on that?
I think that she did decent. I'm trying to really call back to the Mystique that we got in those earlier films, and then that Mystique in those earlier films was very cold. But I don't believe that she was always like that. Maybe there were things that happened in this film that caused that kind of coldness, or the way that she sought the closeness of Professor X, that, it was like an unrequited love that she had. He saw her as a sister, but she wanted more. So she got a little bit more of that attention from Magneto. And there is a moment where we do get that original Mystique actress. She turns into her.
Yeah, in bed. I thought that was an interesting choice.
An interesting moment, too. It's like they brought her in just for that moment.
The best cameo by far is when, Professor X and Magneto are going on their recruiting spree. And they go to a bar, and who's at the bar but Wolverine, who's just like, F off.
Yes, dude, that was so awesome.
Yeah.
But then it's like, wouldn't there be recognition in the films that we got before, like there be some sort of recognition, like, oh, I remember you. Like there was no recognition from Magneto. I mean, I don't know if there was any from Professor X.
Point,
I mean, he knew in his mind.
Yeah, Professor X knew that Wolverine was called Logan.
Right.
I don't know how he knew that. I just assumed he read it in his mind in the first movie.
Right. That's what I assumed too.
When it comes to would they remember, you have to also remember it's also like 40-something years later. I think it's more likely that Professor X would have remembered than Magneto, because at this point, he doesn't have the adamantium in his body, so he wouldn't register to Magneto as someone worth...
That's true. That's true. Yeah, I mean, honestly, had he had that adamantium, I probably would have been like, oh, no, I remember you. You've got a lot of metal in you. Like, I mean, how would you forget that? If you're a man that manipulates metal, you could never forget that,
Yeah, like he was able to feel like the guns on the different ships moving in their direction just on instinct, like he would be able to tell, like, okay, this guy's lined with a very strange metal. I've never felt it before, So there's that. What did you think about Sebastian Shaw and some of the other characters that they introduced in this movie?
It was interesting, played by Kevin Bacon.
I liked it, actually. I think the visual of him absorbing power kind of emulated some of the special effects you might see with some of the agents in the Matrix series.
Oh yeah,
especially like when he was
like when they're getting
guns.
Shot at, and like they'll kind of warp and like bend. I totally see that. His Azazel was interesting. He was the Nightcrawler-esque character.
Yeah, he was all red.
I mean, he had some moves though, man. Like he really knew how to maximize his abilities. And we get Emma Frost, which is interesting. We get her in this capacity.
And this is another thing where it doesn't make any sense if you try to connect it to the previous X-Men movies. Because there was another Emma who was the sister of that one girl that Wolverine was, in love with in X-Men Origins Wolverine. She had the same ability. Her name was Emma. It was very clearly Emma Frost. But
that's right.
She wasn't a villain in that movie, and she hadn't developed her powers like she does in this movie. And she was far younger in the X-Men Origins Wolverine movie. So it just doesn't line up. It's two characters that are the exact same.
Right. I mean, so the age and the power thing is definitely the villain part. I could imagine, like, I mean, there could be an easy explanation, like, oh, after the falling out of this, like, she was like,
yeah, you can hand wave it
I'm
around.
not feeling this. But yeah, no, but you're right about the other stuff. So there's that. We get like this whole team also. Like, we haven't even covered...
while we're still like talking about Sebastian Shaw and the villains, I just want to say, like, there's a pretty spectacular plot hole when at the end of the movie we never understand why he does it, but he absorbs basically an entire nuclear submarine's worth of radiation, and then Magneto kills him by putting that coin through his head. Where does that radiation go? Why did he not blow up? Why isn't that whole side of Cuba now irradiated? Like, what's going on? They just abandoned that plotline for whatever reason. I understand that made him stronger, but like, he's full of radiation. He's full of energy. Like, that's got to go somewhere, right?
I don't know. Does he absorb and nullify it until he needs to use it?
Yes, but energy is still energy. It would still have to be, the basic laws of energy. Like, you can store energy, but it has to go somewhere eventually, So
we know how it is, man. Comic books.
Yeah.
The laws of energy and physics are just absolutely insane.
Just hand wave in front of me, Dakota. You're thinking too hard. This is not meant to be taken seriously. Yeah,
that was an interesting moment, though. That visual, I like the submarine with the coin going through.
Yes.
Through his head, and then
what a great shot.
James McAvoy was pretty much like seeing through Sebastian Shaw and trying to talk Magneto out of doing it, Professor X. And so like with the coin going through, and you see Professor X just like he's screaming because I'm assuming he's feeling that pain too.
I'm assuming, but he also realizes that he can't stop like the freeze that he's put on Sebastian Shaw because he has the ability to essentially let off a nuke whenever he wants to. He's that dangerous. So he doesn't want this character killed but he experiences all the pain that this character experiences when Magneto does that. But I love that scene so much because it kind of exemplifies the shift in Magneto's personality where like he no longer feels that he can trust Charles, so he puts the helmet on himself. You know, he thinks that Charles is going to stop him, which Charles probably would have, you know? So,
yeah.
Well done. I think it's a really cool scene and a good ending. You know, that the visual of like him and Magneto, you know, holding all these missiles in the air and, you know, dropping them as they're fighting on this beach, and all the soldiers on the ships. Cool. All the soldiers on the ships, you know, like, you know, saying their goodbyes to each other. While we're at this scene, this is how Professor X eventually gets paralyzed. Moira McTaggart is shooting at Magneto, and he deflects a bullet, and it hits him in his lower spine, which renders him incapable of walking, basically. So that's his origin.
Cool though, like Magneto's like blocking it, and you hear like the ping of the deflection.
Yeah, it's cool.
Yeah, that was a really cool scene. We've kind of talked a bit about, you know, what's going on in the film. I mean, this movie is called First Class for a reason, and we should cover at least a little bit of why that's called First Class. First Class being this is the first X-Men team that we get. Would you like to go over the X-Men team? So
we have Jennifer Lawrence's Mystique. We've spoken a little bit about her. I also wasn't crazy about her performance. It never felt like she was really in it, I guess, to me, and I feel that way throughout the series, the films that I have seen of her in it. It never feels like she's entirely on board with the role. For me, it may be different for you. It might be different for you listeners out there. But we also had Nicholas Hoult as Beast, which is an interesting role. Eventually, his desire to have more normal-looking feet, I guess. He really wants to go to the beach, guys. He wants to go to a public beach. He can't go to a beach
until to put his toes in the sand.
He's got to get his toes wet. Yeah, his endeavor to cure himself of that non-human looking feet eventually turns him into a blue furry animal. So I thought he looked really awkward. I don't know.
The pinnacle of his evolution, you know? I
think Kelsey Grammer as Beast in the previous X-Men Last Stand was way better looking than Nicholas Hoult as Beast. Personally, it just looked really strange. Maybe he just got better at grooming himself. I don't know. Let's see. We talked about Emma Frost a little bit. Kevin Bacon. I'm just going through the cast list as we go through it. Zoe Kravitz is in this.
Yes.
And she plays a character named Angel Salvador. And she's kind of like a stripper turned, I guess, mutant activist when she's hired on by Charles and Eric to join their cause, and eventually joins up with Sebastian Shaw, and eventually then turns to working with Magneto. So she's a villain, guys. She's a baddie. But she has the ability to spit little acid pellets at people.
Right, and she can fly. I thought it was really cool that the wings, that she could make them into tattoos. Like, they formed onto her body. Yeah,
that was interesting. It was very fairy-esque. I will say I didn't like that her name was also Angel, because we had a character named Angel in X-Men Last Stand. But anyway, we had the actor Caleb Landry Jones play Banshee, who is kind of both a really cool character and kind of comedic relief, you know? It's just a ridiculous superpower, like to be able to like make yourself fly by screaming. But they make it cool and believable, you know? Like even like the part where they use him to like get like sonar underwater. I thought it was well done.
Yeah, that was definitely cool.
We get Havoc, you know, Scott Summers' brother, who doesn't have the concussive blasts in his eyes. But sorry, my cat's making strange demands behind me. Yeah, Havoc has like blasts that come out of his chest, and eventually they find a way to channel it so that he can actually control it. Because in the beginning, when he first starts using his powers, homie like did like hundreds of thousands of dollars of damage to like CIA property. It was crazy. They were all just like partying, they were all having a good time, but yeah, homie like destroyed those buildings. One character that everybody gets annoyed about regularly on Twitter, there's always the meme, remember when X-Men killed the only character who can't die, and it's Darwin? Technically, the character is basically immortal. Like, he's one of those characters that physically can adapt to anything. So no matter what Sebastian Shaw did to him, he would have been able to adapt to it. And he's an interesting character. They don't really call him an Omega level mutant, even though he is technically on that level, or he can be on that level, even though he can't really control when his powers pop up. They just happen whenever it's, necessary for him to adapt. Darwin in the comics could potentially like be god level, like if they threw him into a star, he would be able to withstand the power of a star, like he's that kind of mutant, but it's circumstantial. So if he was just walking through a New York street, he doesn't really have any overt power. He's not going to be able to lift a car up or anything like that. So it's interesting. He's an interesting character. But yeah, they killed him.
Yeah, I did catch that. He's like, I can adapt to any situation. I was like, so they blew this man up. So yeah, he could essentially just survive any disaster and, tell the tale.
Yeah, but that's basically the X-Men team that they come up with. Unless I'm missing anyone?
We did miss one villain. I don't remember what his name is. Tornado. The Tornado guy.
Tornado guy. The hell is his name? I don't even remember. I'm looking.
Riptide.
I'm going through like the cast list right now. Alex Gonzalez plays a character called Riptide. He's able to create small funnels or large funnels, depending on, whatever room he's in. But I thought he was okay. I didn't really care for his character. He's one of those characters that just shows up for one movie and then that's it.
Kind of like what they did with Toad.
With Toad, Sabretooth in the original trilogy. There's a whole bunch.
Nightcrawler.
Going back, I want to just jump back to something that I keep thinking about whenever I think about X-Men Last Stand. When Magneto eventually gets to the island that they're holding that one kid prisoner in X-Men Last Stand, he basically tells the mutants to go, and half of them run and the other half of them all do the same leap, and I'm like, do all of these mutants have the same powers? What is going on? Because jumping high is kind of a superpower in and of itself. It's a bad superpower, but it's a superpower.
I don't know, maybe they have some sort of superhuman strength that lets them...
But it was funny because they were clearly all on strings, and they were all being pulled in the air at the same time. I know that I'm getting way off.
It's obviously target, somebody has to climb down because they can't jump that high.
Yeah. But anyway, X-Men First Class, really solid movie. I really dig the...
First class film.
Yeah, it is a first class film. Will the others be first class films? We shall see. Next, anyway. I don't even know.
Some I would say yes. Some I would say no. But I don't think that they ever get as bad as Origins.
I think you're right. It'll be fun going back to this and ranking them all.
Yes. I think
that would be really fun.
I think that on our Deadpool 3, we should start off hey, we've made it. Let's rank up to this point.
I think that'd be a good idea. And actually, let's see.
Or we could do it at the end, because we can incorporate Deadpool. Or not Deadpool 3, but Deadpool and Wolverine.
So Deadpool and Wolverine will be the 14th movie that we do this to. This is going to be the biggest stint of episodes that are themed in a row for us. But the next show that we're going to have to do, unless you want to take a break and do something else for a week, the next show would have to be The Wolverine.
We're going back to Hugh Jackman. We should do that. We definitely we're gonna get to Deadpool Wolverine a little bit after it releases, but I think that's gonna be good because that'll give our fans time to actually watch it and let it marinate. And I think that we're moving at a pretty good clip. I do want to say, actually, I meant to recommend this, or I meant to ask earlier, and we can talk about which one. But while we're in the midst of watching these X-Men films, I would like to cover an anime after this. Maybe a one-seasoner.
Okay, let's do it. Friends, guys, thank you so much for listening to us here for our 83rd episode of Project Geekology. Do yourself a favor, download all of our episodes
every day
and listen to them and listen to them, delete them and then download them again once you're done. Guys, we really do appreciate your listens. I'm being facetious here. Don't overload your devices with our with our voices. But if you enjoy our show, please be sure to give other episodes that might interest you a listen, and be sure to rate us a nice fat juicy 5-star rating wherever you listen to podcasts.
Yes, do what Dakota said, or else nothing. I'm just kidding.
Or else we will have to make another episode.
Exactly. We're just gonna keep going. That's it. We're already 83 episodes deep. We're just gonna keep going.
We might as well go to 84 at this point.
Or 85.
Let's not go crazy there. Guys, yeah, thank you so much. If you want to check us out on our socials, be sure to find all of our socials, whether it be for the podcast, our respective channels, our personal socials, whatever, in the show notes down below. And yeah, thank you so much, guys. Next week, The Wolverine.
Yes, watch it if you haven't watched that at all or haven't watched it in a while, so that you can join us in the discussion.
And remember, get naked, paint yourself blue, because mutant and proud, baby.
Nobody will notice.
Bye, guys.
Bye.